Welcome to Sleepy Nights, a place where imagination and mystery intertwine, guiding you into a world of wonder and rest. As we journey together, let the soothing sound of the rain and the calming rhythm of my voice carry you closer to a peaceful slumber. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating these stories that ease your mind and lull you to sleep. Now, settle in, relax, and let your thoughts drift away. Stormy nights have always brought me a strange sense of comfort. There's something about the sound of rain against glass and the distant rumble of thunder that makes the world outside feel far away, like the storm builds a barrier between me and everything else. That night, the rain started early, a soft drizzle that steadily grew heavier as the evening deepened. I was alone in the apartment, a high-rise I had rented for the month to escape the monotony of my usual routine. The view from the 23rd floor was breathtaking, even in the rain. City lights stretched out endlessly, their reflections shimmering in the puddles below, while the occasional streak of lightning illuminated the sky in brief, electrifying bursts. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, letting the steam warm my face as I watched the storm rage outside. The wind howled, rattling the glass, but inside, everything was serene, cozy. Or at least it was, until I noticed something on the balcony. At first I thought it was a trick of the rain or a reflection from the city lights. But when the lightning flashed again, I saw it clearly. A figure. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, the mug in my hand suddenly feeling too heavy. The balcony wasn't large, just enough space for a small table and a couple of chairs, and it was surrounded by a thick glass railing. There was no conceivable way anyone could be standing there. The apartment was on the 23rd floor. The balcony was completely inaccessible from the outside, and yet, there they were. The figure stood perfectly still, their face obscured by the rain and the glass between us. They were tall, their posture unnaturally rigid, and their head tilted slightly as though studying me. I blinked, hoping they would vanish, that it was just some distortion caused by the rain streaking down the window. But when I opened my eyes, they were still there, closer now, their face pressed against the glass. A chill crept up my spine, and my breathing grew shallow. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was a neighbor from one of the adjoining apartments, though I knew that was impossible. The balconies didn't connect, and even if they did, who would climb over in the middle of a thunderstorm? I stood slowly, careful not to spill my tea, and took a hesitant step toward the window. The figure didn't move, but as I got closer, I could see more details. Their clothes were dark and soaked, clinging to their body. Their hands were pressed flat against the glass, fingers splayed, leaving streaks of water on the surface. It wasn't until I was just a few feet away that I saw their face, or rather, the lack of it. Where their features should have been, there was nothing but a smooth, pale expanse. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a blank canvas that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. I stumbled back, dropping the mug. It shattered on the hardwood floor, the sound breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the room. I half expected the figure to react, to flinch or move, but they remained as still as a statue. And then the lightning flashed again. For a split second, the room was bathed in stark white light. When it faded, the balcony was empty. I stood there, my chest heaving, staring at the spot where the figure had been. Rain continued to streak down the glass, and the wind howled as if mocking my fear. I told myself I had imagined it, that it was nothing more than a strange illusion brought on by the storm and my own overactive imagination. But as I bent down to pick up the pieces of the broken mug, I noticed something. a wet footprint. The footprint was clear and unmistakable, a single waterlogged mark on the hardwood floor just inside the balcony door. I stared at it, my mind racing. Had the figure been inside? How was that even possible? I checked the lock on the balcony door. It was still latched, secure as it had been all evening. My hands trembled as I touched the glass, half expecting to feel something cold and foreign on the other side, but there was nothing. Shaking my head, I grabbed a towel to clean up the broken mug and the water. As I worked, I tried to calm myself, rationalizing everything. Maybe the footprint was mine, left earlier when I'd stepped out briefly to check the storm. Maybe I was letting the storm get to me. But deep down, I knew better. I spent the next hour trying to distract myself, turning on the television and scrolling aimlessly through my phone. But no matter how much noise I surrounded myself with, the memory of that faceless figure lingered. Eventually, exhaustion won out. I turned off the lights and crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. The sound of the rain, which had once been soothing, now felt oppressive, each drop hammering against the windows like an insistent knock. Just as I was beginning to drift off, I heard it. A soft tapping sound. I sat up, my heart pounding. The tapping continued, steady and deliberate, coming from the direction of the balcony door. I didn't want to look. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stay where I was, to hide under the covers like a child afraid of the dark. But something else, a morbid curiosity, or perhaps a deep-seated need to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind, compelled me to move. I crept out of bed and tiptoed to the living room, the tapping growing louder with each step. When I reached the balcony door, I saw it again. The figure was back, standing in the same spot as before, their hands pressed against the glass. But this time, their head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as though they were listening for something. I froze, unsure of what to do. Should I call the police? Run? But before I could make a decision, the lightning flashed once more. And in that brief moment of illumination, I saw the figure wasn't alone. Behind them, in the shadows of the storm, were dozens of others, their faceless heads all turned toward me. I stumbled back, my scream caught in my throat. When the light faded, the balcony was empty again. The rain continued to fall, oblivious to the terror it had brought with it. I thought it was over. I wanted it to be over. But then I saw the mirror. The mirror hung on the wall opposite the balcony, a decorative piece I had barely noticed before. But now, as I stared at it, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure was there, standing behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. Yet in the mirror, the figure remained. Closer now, their blank face inches from mine. The last thing I remember before the world went dark was the sound of my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears like the rain against the glass. When I woke, it was morning. The storm had passed, and sunlight streamed through the windows. Everything seemed normal, except for the footprints. They trailed across the floor, leading from the balcony door to the mirror, and then nowhere. I moved out of the apartment that day, but sometimes when it rains, I catch glimpses of something in the reflections of puddles and windows. And I can't shake the feeling that the figure, and the others like it, are still watching. The storm caught me unprepared. I'd been hiking solo through a dense forest, my escape from the concrete monotony of the city. The forecast had promised a clear sky, but nature, indifferent to human predictions, had decided otherwise. By the time the first raindrops fell, I was miles from the nearest town, with no tent or proper gear to shield me from the growing downpour. As the rain intensified, the trail became a slippery mess of mud and fallen leaves. My boots squelched with every step, and the chill seeped through my jacket, making my fingers ache. That's when I saw it. A house, or what was left of one. Nestled near the edge of a stream, it was a small, weather-beaten structure with a sagging roof and crooked shutters. At any other time, I might have ignored it, fearing what or who might lurk inside. But the storm offered no choice. Pushing open the creaky door, I stepped inside. The house was empty, its interior lit by the gray light filtering through broken windows. Dust blanketed the sparse furniture, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling like forgotten decorations. Despite its disrepair, the place felt oddly welcoming, as if it had been waiting for me. I dropped my soaked backpack onto the floor and wrung out my jacket. The sound of the rain on the tin roof was steady, almost hypnotic, a rhythm that seemed to echo the stream outside. I settled into an old wooden chair by the window, staring out at the water. The stream was narrow but swift, its surface rippling with the force of the rain. It was strangely beautiful, its dark waters glistening in the fading light. Then I heard it. At first, I thought it was the wind, a faint murmur that rose and fell, blending with the rain. But as I listened closer, the sound grew distinct, soft whispers, as if a crowd of voices were speaking just beyond the edge of hearing. I leaned forward, straining to make out the words, but they were too faint, too tangled in the rush of the water. It was unsettling, but not frightening, at least not yet. They're just my nerves, I told myself. The rain, the wind, the isolation, it's all playing tricks on me. Still, I couldn't tear my gaze from the stream. The whispers continued, weaving through the sound of the rain like a thread through fabric. As night fell, the whispers grew louder. I had lit a small fire in the crumbling hearth, its flickering glow casting long shadows across the room. The warmth was a welcome relief, but it did little to ease the growing tension. The whispers were no longer a murmur. They were voices, distinct and articulate, speaking words that seemed to flow directly from the stream. "Eleanor," one voice said, clear as day. I froze. Eleanor was my grandmother's name, a name I hadn't spoken in years. "How do you know that name?" I whispered, though I wasn't sure whom or what I was asking. The stream offered no answer, but the whispers didn't stop. They spoke of things I'd long forgotten, my childhood home, a secret I'd once shared with a friend, a decision I regretted but never admitted aloud. It was as if the water knew me. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew better. The whispers weren't random. They were deliberate, intentional, pulling memories from the depths of my mind like a fisherman reeling in a catch. The wind outside howled, and the fire sputtered, throwing shadows that seemed to dance with the rhythm of the whispers. I wrapped myself in my damp jacket, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. Then the voices changed. "Come closer," they said, their tones soft but insistent. I shook my head, backing away from the window. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling. The whispers grew louder, more forceful. "Come to us. We have more to tell you. Secrets you've forgotten. Truths you've never known." My heart pounded, a wild drumbeat in my chest. The pull was undeniable, a magnetic force that seemed to draw me toward the door. "No," I said again, louder this time, trying to drown out the voices. But they didn't relent. It felt like hours passed as I sat there, locked in a silent battle with the stream. Every time I closed my eyes, the whispers grew sharper, cutting through the rain like shards of glass. I tried to think of something, anything, that could explain what was happening. Was it the isolation, the storm, some trick of the wind and water? But deep down, I knew the truth. This was no trick. The stream was alive, and it wanted something from me. Eventually, exhaustion won. I drifted into a restless sleep, my dreams filled with images of the stream, its dark waters twisting and writhing like living things. When I woke, the fire had burned out, and the house was dark. The rain had stopped, but the whispers remained. They were louder now, almost deafening. "Come to us," they demanded. "It's time." I don't know what compelled me to obey. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was something deeper, something I couldn't name. I stepped outside, the cold air biting my skin. The stream glistened under the pale moonlight, its surface unnaturally still. The whispers surrounded me, echoing in my ears, my mind, my very soul. They told me things I didn't want to hear, truths about myself, my past, my future. And then they asked for payment. "One life," they said, "for every secret we've given." I stumbled back, my heart racing. "I didn't ask for your secrets," I shouted, my voice breaking. The stream rippled, its surface distorting as if in anger. "But you listened," the voices said, their tone cold and unyielding. I turned to run, but the ground beneath me felt like quicksand, pulling me closer to the water's edge. In my panic, I slipped, my hands sinking into the wet earth. The stream loomed before me, its dark waters churning with a malevolent energy. And then I saw them, faces beneath the surface, pale and ghostly, their eyes wide with despair. They stared at me, mouths moving silently, as if begging for release. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the stream. The next thing I remember is waking up on the forest floor, the sun shining through the trees. The house was gone, and the stream was dry, its bed a cracked expanse of earth. I stumbled back to the trail, my mind racing. Had it all been a dream, a hallucination brought on by the storm? But even now, as I sit in the safety of my home, I can still hear the whispers when it rains. And I know the stream is waiting. It was one of those evenings when the rain fell in soft sheets, transforming the world into a watercolor painting. I had always loved walking in the rain. It had a way of washing away the noise of the world, leaving only the rhythmic patter of droplets and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. That night was no different. Umbrella in hand, I wandered through the park near my apartment, savoring the solitude that came with the storm. The park was nearly empty, save for the faint glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. The air smelled of wet earth and leaves, a scent I always found oddly comforting. As I rounded a bend near a bench, something caught my eye. A book, no, a diary, lay abandoned on the bench, its leather cover worn and darkened by the rain. The pages fluttered slightly in the breeze, and for reasons I couldn't quite explain, I felt compelled to pick it up. It was heavy with water, the edges of the pages frayed and curling, but it wasn't ruined. The penmanship, written in an elegant script, had survived remarkably well. I glanced around, half expecting someone to claim it, but the park was as empty as ever. Shrugging, I tucked the diary under my arm and continued home, the rain tapping against my umbrella like impatient fingers. Once inside my apartment, the warmth wrapped around me like a blanket. I set the diary on the kitchen counter, its damp cover glistening under the light. Part of me wanted to let it dry out and forget about it, but curiosity tugged at my thoughts. Who had written it? Why was it left there? I brewed a cup of tea, the steam curling in the air as I settled into my armchair. The rain continued its symphony against the windows, a soothing backdrop to my newfound mystery. I opened the diary, careful not to tear the fragile pages. The first entry was dated nearly a year ago.
I love the rain. It brings a certain clarity, a kind of peace that nothing else can match. Today I walked through the park, letting the drops soak into my skin. and then I saw him, a stranger, standing near the bench. He didn't see me, but I couldn't look away.
The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. It was strange, reading someone's private thoughts like this, but there was something captivating about the words. They were simple, yet they carried an intimacy that pulled me in. As I turned the pages, the entries seemed unremarkable at first. Mundane musings about the weather, daily routines, fleeting observations. But then I reached an entry that made my breath catch.
Today, I found something unexpected. A diary left on a park bench in the rain. I couldn't just leave it there, so I brought it home. Now it sits on my kitchen counter, and I'm deciding whether to open it.
I froze. The words mirrored my own actions exactly. I reread the passage, my pulse quickening. It was impossible, but there it was, written in black ink on water-streaked paper. That night I barely slept. The diary sat on my nightstand, its presence heavy and unnerving. I told myself it was just a coincidence, a bizarre fluke, but deep down, I didn't believe it. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the world damp and muted, but the unease lingered. I hesitated before opening the diary again, but curiosity won out. The next entry was dated the day after the previous one.
I didn't sleep much last night. The diary felt like it was watching me, if such a thing were possible. I told myself it was just my imagination, but that didn't stop me from checking the locks on my doors and windows more than once.
My stomach churned. I glanced at the locks on my door, the chain secured just as I had left it. The next few entries described small, insignificant details of my life. A spilled cup of tea, a phone call from a friend, the book I had been reading. Each detail was accurate, down to the color of my tea mug and the name of the friend who had called. I didn't understand how it was possible. How could this diary know my life in such intimate detail? Days turned into weeks, and I found myself unable to resist the diary's pull. Each time I read an entry, it seemed to predict events before they happened. Sometimes they were harmless, a sudden downpour, a forgotten errand, but other times, they were unsettling. One evening, I read an entry that made my blood run cold.
The phone rings at 8:37 p.m., a wrong number, but the voice on the other end lingers a moment too long before hanging up. There's something strange about it, something that doesn't feel quite right.
I checked the time, 8:30 p.m. My heart pounded as I stared at the phone, willing it not to ring. At exactly 8:37, it did. I hesitated before answering, my hand trembling as I lifted the receiver. Hello? There was silence on the other end, followed by a faint, almost imperceptible breath. Then, the line went dead. The diary's predictions grew darker after that. It began to describe a shadowy figure watching me from the corner of my vision, always just out of sight. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia, but then I started to notice things. A fleeting movement in the mirror, a shadow that didn't belong to anything in the room. One entry described a dream I hadn't yet had, where I was walking through the park in the rain, the diary clutched in my hands. In the dream, the rain whispered to me, a low murmuring voice that I couldn't understand. When I had the dream that night, it felt more real than any dream I'd ever experienced. The rain whispered my name. I tried to get rid of the diary. I left it on a different park bench, hoping someone else would find it, but it reappeared on my kitchen counter the next morning. I burned it in the fireplace, watching the flames consume the pages. But when I turned around, it was sitting on my armchair, untouched. It wouldn't let me go. The final entry appeared one night, written in a hand that wasn't mine, but felt familiar nonetheless.
The rain falls, and the diary closes. The final chapter is written, the last secret revealed. But the story doesn't end here. It never does. They'll find the diary, just as you did, and they'll think it's their story. But it's mine. It always has been.
I closed the diary, my hands trembling. Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft and insistent, whispering secrets I couldn't unhear. And I knew this was only the beginning. Rain has always been my solace. Something about its steady rhythm, the way it muffles the world and makes everything feel distant, lulls me into a kind of peace I can never quite find otherwise. That night was no exception. The storm had rolled in with little warning, bringing with it a downpour so heavy that it seemed the entire world was drowning in sound. I curled up in bed, the blanket pulled up to my chin, and let the storm's song wash over me. I closed my eyes and focused on the thunder, how it rumbled and cracked like some ancient voice calling out across time. The flashes of lightning painted my bedroom in stark, fleeting light, turning familiar shapes into sharp silhouettes. Despite the storm's ferocity, I felt safe, wrapped in the cocoon of my tiny apartment. That's when I first heard it. A lullaby. At first I thought it was my imagination, a trick of the rain and wind mingling in some accidental harmony. But it was there, faint but unmistakable. A soft, lilting melody threaded through the sound of the storm. The voice was gentle, almost maternal, carrying words I couldn't quite make out. It didn't frighten me. On the contrary, it was soothing. My muscles, tense from the day's stresses, began to loosen as I sank deeper into my bed. I didn't question it. Not at first. The minutes stretched on, and the lullaby persisted, its melody weaving around the thunder like an embrace. I found myself drawn to it, my focus sharpening as I tried to make out the words. They were just out of reach, slipping through my comprehension like water through my fingers. I should have been alarmed. I should have wondered why, in the middle of a raging storm, I was hearing a voice where no voice should be. But I wasn't. It felt natural, like the lullaby had always been there, waiting for me to notice. The voice grew louder, still soft, but now distinct enough that I could feel its resonance. It wasn't coming from outside, where the rain lashed against the windows. It wasn't drifting through the walls from a neighbor's apartment. It was coming from beneath me. A shiver ran through me, cutting through the warmth of the blankets. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was imagining things, letting the storm and the dark play tricks on my mind. But the voice didn't stop. I leaned over the edge of the bed, peering into the shadows pooling on the floor. The thunder rumbled again, and for a moment, I thought I saw something. A flicker of movement, a shifting of shadows that shouldn't have been there. "Hello?" My voice came out barely above a whisper, trembling with uncertainty. The lullaby paused. The silence that followed was more oppressive than the storm. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the rain hammering against the windows, and I let myself believe that it was over, that whatever I'd heard was just my imagination. Then the voice returned, louder this time, as though it were rising to meet me. "Listen," it said, the words stretching out like a sigh. "I'll keep you safe." My breath hitched, and I scrambled back onto the bed, pressing myself against the headboard. The voice wasn't threatening. If anything, it was warm, inviting. But there was something wrong about it, something that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I wanted to run, to leave the room, the apartment, and never look back. But I couldn't. My body refused to move, caught in the lullaby's web. It wasn't just a sound. It was a presence, wrapping around me like a velvet ribbon, gentle but unyielding. The voice began to hum again, the melody looping in a way that made my thoughts blur and slow. I felt my eyelids grow heavy, the pull of sleep as irresistible as a tide. "Stay," it murmured, the word vibrating through the mattress. "Stay, and I'll keep you safe, forever." I fought to keep my eyes open, my mind racing even as my body succumbed to the voice's spell. What was it? Who was it? The rational part of me clung to the idea of an explanation. An old vent carrying a neighbor's music, or some strange acoustics of the storm. But deep down, I knew better. Gathering what little strength I had left, I swung my legs over the side of the bed and forced myself to stand. My knees wobbled, and the floor felt colder than it should have, as though the warmth of the apartment had been drained away. The voice faltered, a discordant note slipping into the melody. "Don't," it said, almost pleading now. "Don't leave. Stay where it's safe." Ignoring the rising panic in my chest, I knelt and lifted the edge of the bed. The space beneath was dark, impossibly so, as though it swallowed the light entirely. And then I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them, glinting faintly in the darkness like drops of oil catching the light. They weren't human, not quite. They were too large, too round, and they blinked in slow, deliberate unison. The lullaby stopped. For a moment, neither the voice nor I moved. The storm outside seemed to dim, as though the rain itself was holding its breath. Then the voice spoke again, softer than before, but carrying an edge that made my skin crawl. "You're not ready," it said, "but you will be." The eyes blinked once more, and then they were gone, swallowed by the dark. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. The room felt colder now, the storm louder and more chaotic. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of my room, the lights on, staring at the bed as though it might come alive. The next morning, the sun rose, painting the sky in soft pastels that seemed at odds with the terror of the night before. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the storm and my exhaustion had played tricks on my mind. But as I pulled the blankets from the bed, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. Etched into the floorboards, in looping, delicate script, was a single word. Listen. The lullaby hasn't returned since that night, but I can't shake the feeling that it's waiting for me, biding its time beneath the thunder. And sometimes, when the storms roll in and the rain begins to fall, I think I can hear it again, faint and distant, calling me back to the edge of sleep. And I wonder if next time, I'll have the strength to resist.